ตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Blessings to you all. One of the ways we talk about the development of our practice, our cultivation of the Dhamma, is how our faith, sattha or belief in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha and the way of practice is developing. How strong is it? How much energy does it have? And just recently I was in Thailand for the Sangha meeting at Ajahn Kalya's monastery. There was about 500 monks there. And you get a very good feeling of faith and positive energy. You could use the word positive vibe. There, when I was there, that was very tangible, very obvious. If you have 500 monastics who have spent many years, most of them many years, some of them very many years, practicing the Dhamma, the Vinaya, following the Buddhist path, there's a very strong, good energy, what you'd say is strong faith in the Buddha and his teachings. People who have committed to the practice for so many years, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, even 80 years, they don't have much doubt in what they're doing. There may be room for a little bit of doubt, but not much. So their minds are very clear, very bright, directed towards the goal of Nibbana, the ending of suffering. So when you're in a large group of people like that, you get a very good energy, good energy, and their faith and the brightness of their minds is very tangible. We actually went to see, after that meeting, we went to see one monk, old monk, Lumpur Seng, who's been a monk for about 80 years. He's about 100 years old. So 80 years of practicing the Dhamma, keeping precepts, meditating, reflecting on the Dhamma, has a very good effect on the human mind. For that monk, Lumpur Seng is considered to be an arahant, completely free from suffering, completely free from greed, anger and delusion. But anyone who's practiced the Dhamma for many, many years will have developed some knowledge and some peace and clarity of mind, which displays in the way they are, their being. There's a good reminder of the benefits of practicing for the long term. It's important sometimes to associate with people like that, if only briefly or occasionally, because the unenlightened mind is prone to doubts, uncertainty. We often lose faith, lose our direction, forget the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, have doubts. And of course those are what we call mental hindrances, doubt or the negativity or the confusion of mind. These are not leading to mental states of clarity, brightness, awareness, the opposite. And so when those more negative mental states come into our mind, we don't feel so confident in what we're doing. We're not so happy to practice. We have doubts, self-doubt or even doubt in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Things get harder. So this is why associating with the wise, those who have practiced, and that's both monastics and lay people, is one part or one factor in the practice. There's many other factors that we need to keep nourishing. Part of our practice is learning how to nourish our mind in the right way. Just as you nourish a baby with milk, or you nourish a plant with fertilizer, we need to nourish our minds with the Dhamma, and many different aspects, not just one aspect. There's many aspects to the practice that we develop, aren't there? We practice generosity, kindness, compassion. We listen to the Dhamma, develop wisdom and reflect on the Dhamma teachings that we've heard. We seek out new Dhamma teachings to reflect on, learn. And of course we practice meditation, develop mindfulness, and we need patience and effort to bring up mindfulness, and then we use our mindfulness to steady the mind, still the mind, so we can see more deeply into the true nature of phenomena. So our practice is about nourishing many different qualities. And sometimes we need to see what our particular practice needs, where we're at in our own life. Or even if we're not particularly aware of where our weaknesses are or what we need. We need to keep nourishing the practice and having different wholesome inputs. So one of them is regularly meeting with Sangha. So even as a monk, I'm a monk, I still meet with other Sangha members and learn from those experiences and get boosted by them. Or maybe I can offer something back to other Sangha members, other monks as well. As Buddhists we do this, we meet with fellow practitioners, whether it's monastics or laity, and that boosts our practice, and it's an opportunity for us to share our own experience with others. And this is one of the nourishing inputs. And the Buddha encouraged us to practice dana in different forms every day. You can practice dana. Sometimes we think that practicing dana or generosity, you have to go to a Buddhist monastery or a temple and do some formal act of offering food or robes or a donation. But of course you can't do that every day. You can't always go to a monastery or a temple or Buddhist center. But dana really starts in the heart, doesn't it? It's an intention. It starts with the intention to give, to share, in whatever way you can. And partly that comes from recognizing the needs of other people around you. There's always somebody less fortunate in the world than you. Or there's somebody who needs help. There may not be somebody who's particularly suffering, but there's just somebody who needs some help, some assistance. And these days you can connect with the rest of the world through globalization, the internet, and so on, through communications and social media. We can practice dana in so many ways. There's always opportunities there. But partly it's also just a state of mind, isn't it? If you go to work, I haven't got time to go to a temple or monastery. I have to go to work to earn a living. Or even going to work to earn a living can be a form of dana, isn't it? If you have the right attitude and you go to that and do a job of work, whatever it may be, to raise money, and maybe that's dana for your family, for yourself, and maybe even also for keeping some money for acts of charity. Even going to work is an opportunity to practice dana, helping people around you at work, giving support, advice, assistance to others. Simply driving your car to work, if that's how you get to work, you can practice dana, can't you? You can let someone else into the queue in front of you. Even if you're in a rush, it doesn't take much just to let someone drive in front of you if they're coming out of a turning or something and they need to get into the lane you're in. You can let them in as an act of kindness or generosity. Or if you're on a bus or a train, you can share your seat with someone or give someone some assistance in some way. Or if there's nothing to do, you can say a few kind words to other people around you, give some information to someone. Or if there's no opportunity to do that, you can just share a few kind thoughts. Mental dana, just send some thoughts of kindness to the people around you, wish them well. Or to people at work, in your workplace, or even just people further away in the world that you know about. You can think of them and wish them well. All of that, you could say, is just part of the practice just as much as when we come here together and meditate, as we have been just a few moments ago. Meditation and practicing mindfulness and developing insight into impermanence is one part of the practice. But developing thoughts of generosity, kindness, compassion is another. And we have to see that the Buddhist path is a very broad path that we can practice at any time, in any place. Because where is the place of practice? It's here. This body, this mind. The Buddha said this fathom-long body. It's about 6 foot. But even if you're only 5 foot or you're 6'6", it doesn't matter, does it? The figure, the height is not the important thing. It's taking your body as the place of practice. And wherever you go in this world, as long as you're alive, you have your body with you. So you have the place of practice with you. It's one of the first hurdles to beginning practicing what the Buddha taught, is just to realize the place of practice is right here, right now, wherever you happen to be. And then seeing what you need to cultivate. And of course, different situations will require different qualities to be cultivated and different responses. And one of the biggest challenges of practicing Dhamma is getting out of that habit of just thinking of Dhamma practice as something you do in a certain place at a certain time, and realizing you can practice the Dhamma wherever you go, as long as you're there. You have this fathom-long body. You have the mind, you have the body, then you can practice the Dhamma. Certainly when you go to a temple or a monastery and you mix with Sangha or fellow Buddhist practitioners, that can be a great boost to the practice. It does give us good energy, a good vibe. But when you're on your own, you can do the same. You simply have to turn your mind to the Dhamma. And it may be a little bit more challenging, especially at home where you have all these other distractions. But you have to learn how to channel the flow of your mental energy towards the Dhamma practice rather than to all the other things that are happening in the world. It's one of the modern challenges of Dhamma practitioners, is how to use your time and your energy well for your benefit, for the benefit of others. To be aware, and also to be aware of the dangers, how easy it is to get distracted. So even right now, as you're listening to me, possibly there's a distraction or the temptation to scroll through your phone or on your computer. If you're watching this through a computer, maybe to turn off from this talk or this meditation session and just already go to something else. It's that easy, isn't it? With computer technology, digital technology now, just literally one click of a button and it takes your mind away from something else. And as you were meditating just now, you know how easy it is for the mind to get distracted by one single thought. So if you put a phone or a computer in front of someone, well, that just increases the opportunity for distraction if they're not disciplined, not careful. But at the same time, the opportunity to practice the Dhamma is there as well. Just as the opportunity for what is not Dhamma, for what is leading to more greed, anger, delusion, more distraction, more suffering is there, the opportunity to practice the Dhamma is also equally there. So where there is delusion, non-delusion is only a moment away, a moment of mindfulness and clear comprehension away, say. Or where there's anger, non-anger, non-ill will, or kindness and compassion is only a mental moment away. Or where there's greed and attachment, mindfulness, non-greed, non-attachment is only a moment away. And this is one of the important things to learn in our practice, is that wherever we are is the place of practice. You might say the best place of practice is a Buddhist monastery, but if that's not available and you're at home or at work, well, that's the place you have to learn to practice. And we're learning to make the best of the situation we're in. So sometimes life is full of challenges. People make things difficult for us. Sometimes we make difficulties for ourselves through our own unmindful behavior. Sometimes it's other people who make trouble for us or bring us problems because of their behavior. But these are just the normal experiences of life. And we can use the Dhamma at any time to deal with the different situations and challenges that come up. And we can't possibly control the whole world and make it always, ideal for Dhamma practice. That's too much. The world is beyond our control. But we can control ourselves within the world that is, often seemingly out of control and confusing, that we can't influence that much, but we can influence ourselves within the world. And so, a lot of our practice is just coming back patiently over and over again back to ourselves, bringing up mindfulness, bringing up effort to clear away some of the hindrances and the distractions in the mind and bring the mind to the present moment, wherever we are. Driving our car, at work, at home, going to bed, eating our food, whatever. The place of practice is right here, right now. And that's one thing we're learning. And learning to bring up more mindfulness in daily life, because we tend to forget the Dhamma. How often do you have that experience? You do some meditation practice or chanting first thing in the morning, which is really good, and you set your mind up in the right way for the day. But then off you go, traveling to work, and very quickly forget all about the Dhamma. And you lose your mindfulness, lose awareness of the Dhamma, and get caught into more distracted states of mind to do with work, and then some of the stresses and the worries that come up, and the more unmindful behavior which feeds the hindrances. So then in the evening you come home, and maybe you're disciplined enough to do some meditation when you come home, but you find that it's like starting again through the day. Your mindfulness was not very strong, so you sit down to meditate in the evening, and it's quite a struggle to bring the mind under control, bring up the mindfulness. And partly this is because we let our minds go. We forget the Dhamma, we forget everything, and it's only when we come back home maybe and we have our corner where we meditate, then we get back into the frame of mind of practice. And that's one of the biggest challenges, practicing mindfulness in daily life, we say. But if you do keep up a formal meditation, and you keep regularly listening to the Dhamma, thinking about the Dhamma, reflecting on it, well, you have the chance to improve your mindfulness little by little through the practice. As long as you're not judging your progress in the practice too harshly, then there's always the opportunity to keep going, keep practicing and improving. Again, one of the obstacles we have, first obstacle is often we feel if we're not in the monastery or the meditation center, then we can't practice. That's the first obstacle. Another obstacle is we're often judging ourselves so harshly we think that it's a waste of time to do the practice, because when we do come to meditate and bring up mindfulness, we feel our mind is just so full of thoughts and so agitated and restless that trying to meditate and bring up mindfulness is just pointless. Maybe we've read too many books or heard too many talks from people like me and other teachers, and you just have such a high expectation of the practice that when you come to sit meditation you notice your mind is not yet very peaceful. Maybe you just want to give up. Because we've read too many books and heard too many talks, we've heard all this inspiring stuff about how the mind can be still in samadhi and have deep insight into impermanence and let go, become bright and free from defilement. We've read that, we've heard that, so we find it inspiring. But then when we come back to look at our own mind in the present moment, it's full of thoughts, worries, greed, anger, delusion, and all of the different kinds of defilements and hindrances. That's the more normal activities of our unenlightened mind. So we experience that, and then we feel a little bit disappointed with ourselves. Either we blame the practice and say the practice is too hard. Maybe we push it back onto the Sangha and say, oh, meditation is for those monks living in the forest. It's not for me, living in the city, working. So either we push it back to others to do and we say, I can't practice, they can. Or we blame ourselves and we say, I've got no merit, I don't have enough parami, last life I probably wasn't meditating, so this life I can't do it. And we start looking around for a few excuses why we should give up meditation. Or maybe what we have to do, a better way of doing it and facing it, is just to lower expectations a little bit and say, the important thing is to be making that effort to bring up mindfulness, whatever way the mind is. If your mind is not peaceful, full of doubts, worries, anxiety, just accept that. Not to blame yourself, not to blame your past self, that, I didn't have enough merit from last life. Not to blame your current self, I just can't do it, I'm no good at meditation. Not to blame the Buddha or the Dhamma, the Sangha or other people and say, well, they can do it, but they can't help me to do it. Just set aside all those doubts and negativity and just accept whatever's coming up in your mind, that's fine. You try to establish mindfulness and your mind is full of thinking and imagination or sleepiness, that's fine. Your aim is simply to bring up mindfulness of one breath in, one breath out, as often as you can. If you're doing a job of work, well, you can be mindful of the work. If you're driving your car, be mindful of your driving. If you're cooking food, be mindful of your cooking. If you're breathing meditation, doing the breathing meditation, well, then you're mindful of your breathing. But any moment of mindfulness is like a victory, one little victory. And if you have many moments of victory, then you win the whole war. But you have to be willing to fight, to struggle. And that's what meditation is. It's not about judging yourself as having a lot of parami from the past, a lot of merit, a lot of good qualities or not enough good qualities, not enough merit, not enough parami. It's just about accepting whatever's coming up in your mind right here, right now, and working with it. Accepting your body, so sometimes your body is not ideal, you have illness or injury, sometimes you're healthy. Accepting your mind, sometimes your mind seems bright, ready for practice, full of faith, full of good vibes, good energy, and then sometimes it's full of bad energy and nothing is there, it just doesn't want to do it, it's very stubborn. But just accepting whatever's there is there. That's just the way it is. And that any effort you put into bringing up mindfulness in that situation is already a step in the right direction. It's already a little victory. And don't expect too much. One thing people always say when they're meditating and their mind does settle down and they let go of a lot of the distractions and the worries is that at the moment that happens and they start to become mindful of the breathing, it seems very natural. And they almost feel like, why didn't I do this before? But it wasn't that they weren't trying before, it's just finally their efforts have come together and the mind gathers together and it settles down and they feel more relaxed, more calm, more happy. But it feels very natural. It's not forced. Because you can't force the mind to let go of things. Can't do it just through willpower. Has to come through the practice of bringing up mindfulness. Turning the attention to the present moment. So this is why we use a meditation object such as the breath. But it could be some other activity like driving a car, cooking food, walking along from one room to another, typing in front of a computer, whatever. Bringing your mindfulness to that task, that activity, when you put that effort in, it brings up a very good quality in your mind, the quality of knowing. And if those moments of knowing start to join together, like drops of water joining into a stream, then there's this great sense of it just feels very natural, very right. It feels correct, it feels right. And you even kind of kick yourself because you feel, why didn't I do this earlier? But if you never try, you'll never know, will you? If you never make the effort with this, you'll never know, you'll never experience that. So part of the practice is just developing the right attitude to cut through the excuses and the blaming yourself, your past self, your current self, your future self. I don't know how you can blame your future self, but people can blame anything in this day and age. Or blaming other people, blaming the Buddha, blaming your friend, blaming me, blaming you, blaming someone. And once you get through that, settle all that down, and mindfulness is established, then there's this great sense of just rightness. The word Ajahn Chah used to use is podi. Mind is podi. It feels just right, just the right amount. The effort is becoming more continuous, just right. And you can experience that not just in meditation, but in other activities. When you absorb into an activity, you often feel just right. You forget all the other problems in your life. You forget time. You forget the excuses. Your mind just absorbs into that job of work or that task of driving a car or cooking a meal or going here, going there. The sense of just rightness can arise at any time. But you have to give it a chance. You have to be willing to practice in these different situations and keep coming back to the present moment, bringing up the mindfulness. And once you have this feeling of just rightness, the mind calms down a bit, then you can see things much more clearly. And so the mind is ripe for the development of wisdom, insight. And the practice of calm and insight, they support each other. When your mind feels calm, just right, it's more still, then you can see things more clearly. You can see distraction as distraction, and you have more strength of mind and more confidence to just let it go. Whether it's irritation or desire or doubt or worry, once you have a bit of mindfulness there, then it's much easier to let go. It's more natural to let go because you have this feeling of just rightness. You don't need anything else to be happy because you're developing this internal happiness, which is so good for us. And this has come from all that nourishing, all that effort and good qualities you've been developing. Sometimes it comes from just a practice of dana. Often people say they practice a bit of dana and then they think of the dana they've done and they already become very calm, peaceful. Sometimes it comes from the practice of sila, or virtue, or morality. When you're not bothering anyone, you're not acting aggressively or annoyingly or selfishly. In a situation you're quite calm and content, you're not bothering anyone, and you recollect that with mindfulness, that you're keeping sila at that time, keeping the 5 precepts. Your mind can become very calm, enter samadhi. We call that silanusati. Recollecting the dana you've done, jakanusati, is recollecting the sacrifice of giving, sharing. Silanusati, recollecting the sacrifice, the sila, the morality you've kept. These wholesome practices nourish the mind, and they can already bring up mindfulness and help us to calm down and enter a state of stillness. Of course, if you practice mindfulness of breathing or any other meditation technique, that will do it as well. But we need to keep developing these wholesome qualities, nourishing our mind in different situations. So there's not only always just one thing to do, it depends on what the situation is. Sometimes we need to develop more kindness and compassion, more generosity. Sometimes we need to focus on our sila. Sometimes we just need to come back to the breath, and you take a few deep breaths and your mind already feels more calm, and you can take up the breath as a meditation object. Even if you're sitting at a desk or sitting at somewhere you're fairly still, you can follow the breathing. Or some people recite the word Buddho, or chant the chant Itipiso, the qualities of the Buddha. And you can recite Buddho walking along the road. You can chant Itipiso as you're quietly doing a task like washing up or cleaning or cooking. Anything that brings mindfulness and brings up a more wholesome state of mind can be a basis for your mind to have this sense of just rightness arise. And it doesn't need anything else at that time. It's just absorbing into whatever activity it's involved with. And you experience some of this inner happiness. So if you are one who's addicted to your phone, well, when this inner happiness arises, you're willing to put your phone down. Turn the computer off. Stop scrolling, stop looking for other things to distract yourself. And that's the purpose of developing this inner mindfulness and then the stillness of samadhi. The mind doesn't need anything else because it feels just right within itself. And this is a very important experience to have, if only briefly. The negativity of blaming everyone else fades. The desires for wanting to keep looking at the phone or the computer or doing something, going here, going there, that fades. And the mind becomes still and quiet within itself. And when you experience that, the mind is not angry or negative, so naturally we have a lot of loving kindness and compassion arise when the mind is more still and mindfulness is there. If you're mindful, you're not angry. So you have loving kindness, if only a little. Even if you're not particularly directing your mind to have loving kindness or compassion for others, you'll have it at least to some degree because you are mindful. Of course, when you fall back into negativity and irritation, the loving kindness disappears. But every moment you establish mindfulness, even if it's on the breath, or just focusing on driving your car or whatever, at that moment you can't be thinking of hurting, harming, criticizing another person. It's just nature, it's a natural law. So if you practice mindfulness, you'll have a sense of contentment, you won't have a lot of desire for other things when you're mindful, and you won't have anger or ill will or irritation. So the mind feels good. It feels good when you're not angry. It feels good when you don't have a lot of desires bothering you. You don't need your phone. You don't need other people to kind of prop you up, make you, deal with to help you cope with feelings of boredom or loneliness. When there's mindfulness there, the mind doesn't have a problem with boredom. And if boredom arises, it's just another mental state that you see with mindfulness and let go. Desire for things doesn't bother you because you see desire as desire, for food or to talk to someone or watch a movie or whatever it is. You see the desire as a desire and you let it go because you're mindful. You have this feeling of just rightness and you don't need anything else. Anger doesn't have a place in the mind when you're mindful. And we all can be mindful, it's just we don't keep our mindfulness there very long. We let the mind fall back into distraction, and it kind of slips downwards, goes down the slippery slope, back to a more normal state of confusion, distraction, irritation, wanting things, not wanting things. But every time you bring up mindfulness, you're bringing the mind back up the hill again to this slightly better place. If you keep doing that, you feel better. It's making that effort, trusting in the practice, having more courage, more confidence to do it, remembering to do it. Half the time we just forget to do the practice. You go to work and you forget all about it till you come home again. Or you go to the monastery and then you come home feeling great, and then a few days later you've forgotten all about it. That's our normal experience. The unenlightened mind is like that. It's like a yo-yo, up and down, up and down, up and down. What we're aiming for is some continuity. So we're bringing up mindfulness. Whatever's happening, whatever's going on, we keep bringing up the mindfulness, practicing generosity, keeping the precepts, bringing up mindfulness, letting go of the hindrances. Over and over again is our aim. Until it becomes established and you have this feeling, oh, it's just right. The mind feels just right, feels good, and you trust in the practice more than anything else. The unenlightened mind likes to trust in everything else, doesn't it? It trusts in making money, paying bills, going out with friends, making all kinds of appointments with friends to do this and do that, traveling, distraction, the phone, the next app, the next this, the next that, the next meal, all kinds of things. We don't really put our trust in the practice of the path yet, Sila Samadhi Panya or Dana Sila Bhavana. We prefer to put our trust in more worldly things. So of course we get disappointed easily and have this experience of irritation and lack of peace. But the more you practice, like those monks who've been a monk for 80 years and have no more doubts about the practice, they just become quite normalized to practicing mindfulness, keeping precepts, practicing dana. They don't have any more doubt about it. So they're constantly experiencing wholesome states of mind which nourish their mind. They're like a well-nourished garden. If you ever go to one of those sort of botanical gardens or country houses that have gardens or wherever it is, where they have lots of gardeners and time and available to keep that garden looking good. And that's the mind of the well-practiced practitioner who's been doing it for 50 years. It's just like a well-tuned engine or a beautifully manicured garden or whatever. It's just quite naturally ticking over in the right way because they've done it enough. And the reason we feel this up and down in our life is because we've done it somewhat, but then we forget. We neglect our garden, we neglect our engine, forget to lubricate it. We're not putting the right inputs in, so our mind slips back into the more unenlightened states of worry and greed and anger. And we just have to keep practicing, keep doing it. Then you've got something you can rely on, you can turn to at any time when you have the crisis, the struggle, the problem. You turn to the Dhamma rather than those worldly things which just make it worse. Looking for the distraction, the sensuality, or blaming people and getting angry. The one who's practiced the Dhamma, like those 500 monks at Wat Papong, Ajahn Chah's monastery, they no longer doubt about it, and they don't. They just don't go to the monastery and practice meditation once in a while when they have some problem, and then the rest of the time forget about it. They're practicing all the time because they trust this is the real way to develop ourselves. They don't have any doubts. The unenlightened mind tends to only go to the Dhamma and the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha when there's a problem, some suffering, some crisis. When the crisis is solved, forget about it. No need to go to the monastery, no need to do any dana, keep the precepts, because the crisis is solved. But it's a very precarious way to practice. You can keep practicing dana, whether things are going badly or good, you keep practicing it. You keep the 5 precepts, whether things are going well or not, you keep doing it. You keep meditating, whether things are going well or not, you keep doing it. Otherwise, your mind is just always up and down because you're not keep putting in the inputs to the practice. It's like that story I always remember when I just flew to the UK because my sister had a car crash. I had to go and visit her in hospital to give her some support. But flying from the UK to the UK from Thailand, I always remember this story of Ajahn Chah, the first time he went to the UK back in the 1970s, and he got in the plane, and I think it was Thai Airways. They offered him tickets with Ajahn Pabakro, the monk who assisted him, and they flew first to Karachi in Pakistan, and they land there, and then they take off again from Karachi, and they have to land in Rome and refuel and then go to England. So it was like 3 or 4 stops before they reached London airport. But when they were in Karachi, they landed, and then they took off from Karachi, the wheels exploded on the plane. At least one of the tires burst, maybe both of them. So the wheels were damaged, and they'd taken off, and the pilot knew there was damage, but there's nothing he could do, so he's in the air. And when they were at Rome airport, before they landed, the pilot tells the people on the ground that they got a problem with their landing gear. The wheels are broken. What should they do? So they had to fly around Rome airport a few times and let the people on the ground assess the damage to see if it's safe enough to land. Really, they had no choice, but they just wanted to prepare. And then they lined up all the fire trucks and the ambulances, and everyone on the plane panicked, and they all go into crisis mode. So they're all crying and wailing and praying and coming to Ajahn Chah and say, Ajahn Chah, you've got to help us and help us. We're going to crash, we're going to die. And Ajahn Chah says, okay, I'll meditate and spread metta. So he went into deep samadhi, as you can imagine Ajahn Chah can do. He doesn't have any doubts, he doesn't have any worries, his mind is well trained, he just practices mindfulness, enters deep samadhi and spreads metta to protect the plane and the crew and the passengers. And they landed, and luckily everything went well, and nobody was hurt, and the plane it wasn't a crash landing. They managed to land relatively smoothly. And then everybody's leaving the plane, and they go up to the pilot and say thank you, and they go to the air stewardesses and say thank you, and nobody comes to Ajahn Chah to say thank you. And he pokes the other monk and said, see, when there's a crisis, they go to the monk, the Buddha. When there's no crisis, the crisis is over, they forget the Buddha, they forget the monks. That's the unenlightened mind. It's like that. We forget the Dhamma. When everything's going well, we become complacent. We don't need the Dhamma. But when we have a problem, we fall ill, we have the injury, we have money troubles, we have relationship problems, some kind of problem somewhere, then we turn to the Dhamma and say, I've got to go to the temple. This is the unenlightened mind. We have to raise our game, bring up the practice and find this place of just rightness inside and keep developing it, whatever's going on the outside. If our life is going well, we have to practice. If our life is going badly, we have to practice. If things are nice and peaceful around us, we have to practice. If things are really desperate and we're struggling, we still have to practice. That's our aim, is to develop this evenness of effort. Keep practicing, keep finding this place of peace inside where we've got mindfulness and insight. So we've got something we can really rely on. We have to learn that. We have to find skillful ways to cultivate the Dhamma, practice kindness and compassion every day, not just when we're struggling, but every day. You be kind to the people around you every day. Practice mindfulness every day. Whether your mind is peaceful or not, it doesn't matter. Most of us, we think, well, when my mind's peaceful, then I'll meditate. When it's not, we can't meditate, I can't meditate, my mind's not peaceful, so we stop. But that's not the way to progress. The way to progress is keep doing it. Don't give up. Do it regularly. Do it every day. Not just when you feel like it, not just when you're in the mood. When you're not in the mood, that's the best time to practice, because then you can transcend your mood, go beyond it. The best time to practice loving kindness really is when you're angry, so you can let go of your anger. The best time to practice letting go of attachment is when you're full of greed and attachment, and you let it go, you work with it. When you're feeling bored, that's the best time to meditate, because then you'll get beyond your boredom and see it's just another thought, another mental state, which is nothing real. When you have some pain in your body, that's a good time to meditate. So you learn to be mindful of pain, and then don't just react to it with aversion, but you learn to be patient, mindful, and reflect on it as impermanent and as not self. At one moment you have pain, then it stops. There's a time when you have pain, there's a time when you don't have pain. If you want to see pain as impermanent, you have to practice mindfulness so that you recognize the quality of impermanence in painful feelings. If you just seek distraction and say, I can't do it, it's too much pain, and you give up and you stop meditating, you don't want to be mindful, and you just want to blank it out, blot it out, well, you may be able to do that for a while, but you won't develop the insight into the impermanence of painful feelings. Practice is like that. We have to learn how to go against some of the moods and the thoughts in our mind, and really bring up the qualities of Dhamma, nourish the mind with Dhamma. When you do see a beautiful manicured garden, it doesn't mean to say that the garden's always been like that. Once upon a time it was a barren piece of earth, and then it had to be cultivated, and it's because of all that work that it was cultivated, and then they brought success and made a beautiful garden. If someone cooks a nice meal, it doesn't mean to say they could always cook a nice meal. They had to learn how to do that. If someone drives their car well, that's something they've learned to do. Dhamma practice is like that. You have to learn how to do it. And if you're finding there's obstacles and difficulties, well, that's what you have to rise to and keep working with them. Don't give up. As I was saying, I went to England last week because I went to visit my sister who was in hospital. But before I went there, I was in Thailand. And when you're in Thailand, it's a Buddhist country. So some friends said, you have, your sister's had an accident, quite serious injuries in hospital. You need to let go or free some live animals. And that's what Buddhists do in response to illness and injury. You free some animals to practice you make the good karma, the dana of freeing animals who would be destined for the cooking pot. Thailand, like any other country, lots of people eat animals every day, different kinds of meat, fish, chickens, cow, beef, and so on. So sometimes Buddhists will go to the slaughterhouse to rescue or free a cow by buying it back from the slaughterhouse, and then take it somewhere where there's a slaughterhouse, where there's a farm, and let it go there and just live out its life till old age. Or they go to the market where there's fish or crabs or turtles that are destined for the restaurant to be cooked and eaten, and they'll buy them back from the market before they're killed and then release them in a river or the ocean. So they took me, and we purchased 3 cows and dedicated it to my sister who had this accident. And those cows were not easy to purchase or release. They were very stubborn, very afraid, I guess. And so chose 3 cows, and they didn't want to be released. Had to put ropes around them and work really hard to pull them out of the slaughterhouse. Even a cow doesn't yet know it's good luck that it's going to be saved from certain death. But once we got them, we tied ribbons around them, then they calmed down and they were much, much happier. And they were sent off to a farm where they have, It's in the charity set up by the king of, the former king of Thailand, the old one who passed away. He had a charity for rescuing cows, and they have a big farm where they keep them, let them die of old age. So we did that, and then we purchased some fish and released them in the river. We tried to release them in a place where there were no other big fish about to eat them. Even when you do good, you have to learn how to do it properly, because you can release fish in the wrong place and then they just get eaten by other fish. So we had to try and find a quiet bit of the river where none of the other fish would notice these fish we were releasing. Hopefully they survived. Well, you have to do that. Sometimes we're a bit complacent in our life, so if you need to release some animals, you pay some money. You might think, oh, what a waste of money, but if you release an animal, you save its life. That animal's going to be happy, and you're teaching yourself to value life. Keeping precepts is the same. Sometimes people are rude to us or abuse us or give us a hard time. The easiest thing is just to be angry with them and argue with them or give them something back. But sometimes you have to go against your habit, or don't take the easy way, you take the hard way and practice patience, restraint in your words. Or sometimes it's just in the mind, isn't it? You have an angry mood and you're stubborn. Like the cow is stubborn, doesn't want to be released. Sometimes we're stubborn in our anger and we don't want to give up our angry thoughts and let them go, forgive someone, or just practice acceptance, patience. Sometimes you have to do that, don't you? Practices like this, you're nourishing your mind with what's needed at the time, wherever you are. If you're angry, you need more patience and loving kindness. If you're greedy, you need more restraint. If you're confused, you need more mindfulness. And sometimes we're just complacent. We can't be bothered. Can't be bothered to do things. Lazy, find excuses. But nobody reached Nibbana by just making excuses. Or sometimes we want to kind of talk our way to Nibbana. We want to make negotiate it. I'll do my meditation tomorrow. Today I'm feeling a bit tired. Or I'll forgive them tomorrow. Today I can't be bothered letting go of my anger. Or today I'm feeling a bit selfish and indulgence. Tomorrow I'll do more dana, but today can I just indulge? If you're doing it that way, you're trying to negotiate your way to Nibbana. It doesn't work, does it? Because you're feeding your defilements rather than nourishing the practice and the wholesome states of mind. So Dhamma practice, sometimes you have to be tough on yourself, go against the grain. Your mind says one thing and you have to do the other if you're practicing the Dhamma. Otherwise, we just keep experiencing the ups and downs of life. You want peace, but your mind won't experience peace if you keep following confusion. And you can't just blame other people or the world. It's the favorite excuse of Buddhists. The world is so confusing, I can't meditate. Well, you can't meditate because you're not doing the meditation. It's not because the world is confusing. We have to learn how to meditate through the confusion of the world. And that's on us. It's not on the rest of the world. If you're waiting for the rest of the world to become peaceful so you can become peaceful, you'll be waiting for eternity. It's never going to happen. You have to do it through your own efforts, your own practice. So maybe I'll leave you with those reflections tonight, and for the rest of the session there may be a time to hear some questions and give some answers.